Hello, lovelies. Hello, friends. Welcome to Thursday's edition of Coffee with Lily. As I welcome you into this healing space, I hope that I can provide value today, and my intention is to talk a little bit about hypervigilance, what it is, what might be causing it, some maybe conscious or unconscious patterns or coping strategies that could be surrounding your particular relationship with hypervigilance. But yeah, so if you have any questions while we're live, drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to address them or to put my spin on it. So hypervigilance. I kind of think of hypervigilance now as like a continuum, not a continuum, but kind of like it's not just one thing. Like semantics matter, like your experience with hypervigilance matters. So I hope that maybe shedding a little bit of light on what my take is on hypervigilance will help you assess and start to be aware of how it's affecting your life. But a state of hypervigilance in kind of anywhere you are on that spectrum of hypervigilance is a state of assessing, like it's a constant assessment of threat. It is, and we talk a lot about relationships here, so I'll try to stay in that vein. And let me also say that this could be a conscious thing, or it could be an unconscious thing that's happening to you right now. Because as mammals, we are wired with our really most primitive aspects of our brain and our nervous system to be wired for threat. If you go back to days when we didn't really have this like physical safety like we have now in our modern day world, when we were out there on surviving in primitive days, part of our existence, like part of living, was that we were very in tune to our environment, and this was biologically ingrained into us through our, I'm sure you've heard of, through our amygdala, and the assessment through I think it's the hypothalamus, and then it goes up to the prefrontal cortex now, which is kind of the newer operating system for humans. But first and foremost, a hypervigilant state is a state of protection. So if you think of it like that, and if you're thinking of relationships, like if you have, for example, an anxious attachment style, if you find anxiety in relationships, sometimes because you really don't know how the other person will react, or, look through my IGTV videos, I feel like, that's what we talk about all the time, which is awesome, and I'm going to continue to talk about it. But if you are noticing states of anxiety with respect to relationships around people, it could be because of a hypervigilant thing that's popping up in your life about assessing threat. So either you really want connection and you really just have to know all the time that you are connected to this person and this person still likes you and you don't want to hurt them, you just want to make sure everything's great. That is kind of a hypervigilant way of thinking, because what you're really protecting yourself from is hurt, is like emotional pain. And what's really interesting too, with it, going back to the biology of things, is that now as like modern day humans, not only are we wired for physical threat, that physical threat detector is now wired to emotional threat as well. And that is like a more modern evolutionary thing that's been happening the last, I don't know, don't quote me on this number, but I'm going to say 500 years. Who knows? I could be wrong about that. But in general, that's definitely the case. So you may notice sometimes, like, when I used to be in a really anxiety-filled state, and I was, let's say, just doing something at work, and I was really in my head. So sometimes if you are in hypervigilant mode, you have a lot of thoughts swirling through your head. You are really jumpy. I remember sometimes people would come up behind me at work and they would scare me and I would jump. And unconsciously, my body was scanning for danger. And danger comes and I react. And that's kind of, that's a funny way of talking about it. But hypervigilance can be very kind of not a great state of being if you want to have connection. Because hypervigilance is not our normal natural state. Our normal natural state is calm, aligned, grounded. If you're masculine, it's like it's consistency, it's support, it's protective. So, and if you think, like, I think about this a lot. Like, I watch animals all the time for cues, and this is just something that I've learned here in the last couple of years, is if you have a pet, watch them when they are in like a calm state, right? They're kind of like chilling, they have their eyes closed, they may be like breathing very rhythmically. They're really just connected to their environment, like almost it's like they're a part of their environment. But when they get activated, their eyes get bigger. They're maybe like their detectors. Like, you can just see that there's a state. Like if they get activated for some reason, and from a biological perspective, that is an appropriate response. If they get excited or if they hear a loud noise, it's like a protective mechanism. But the problem is that when we are in this hypervigilant state all the time, and this could be, again, I feel like this is a continuum, like where, even like disorders like schizophrenia, paranoia are really, really high on that other side of this hypervigilant state. It's almost when like that state completely takes us over, and it's like, it's kind of a really overactive hypervigilant response to your environment. But then there's those little things in the middle that we talk about, especially when it comes to attracting that love and those relationships that you really want. And if you're always in that hypervigilant state, you're never going to feel connected because you can't. Like, there is no way that you can let love and connection in if anxiety and hypervigilance is our normal state. So if hypervigilance is a form of protection, also, what I wanted to say about this too is that think of some behaviors that you want to change. Like, for me, I loved ice cream. Like, ice cream was my coping mechanism. Sometimes it was sex. Sometimes it was shopping. Sometimes it was drinking and going out and having fun. And the relationship, I think, between a highly hypervigilant state and our coping mechanisms, and yours, at least for mine, so just, an awareness piece for you, is that those are soothers. They're trying to we are trying to soothe down this constant state of anxiety and hypervigilance because we don't know what else to do. So just a thought on that. And if you're finding yourself in this kind of danger state when there isn't any physical danger there, like, let's just make sure, let's put this out there here explicitly, that if you're in physical danger, absolutely hypervigilance is a perfect adaptation for that experience. But if you're finding yourself in physical safety, but you're still in a hypervigilant mode with assessing for danger, consciously or unconsciously, lots of swirling thoughts in your head, maybe some like coping mechanisms or behavioral patterns that you want to change, there is likely an internal state or an internal emotional trauma wound that needs to be healed. Because, yeah. Yes. Because that state, like that wound, is really almost kind of running our lives. Like it's telling us that people are unsafe. It's telling us that we need to constantly be on someone's mind, or we're not relevant, or we're not loved. So healing the hypervigilance is not so much about healing the symptoms of hypervigilance, unless like it's activating physically, like autoimmune responses are pretty good indications that there's a lot of anxiety happening inside. So a physical, like a physical aspect, and then there's an emotional aspect too, which is of course why I'm here. So healing that emotional wound within you is going to start to teach that part that it doesn't need to be on alert all the time. And what that does, it really starts to bring you back into yourself. It really starts to find safety in a physically safe environment, but it just doesn't know it yet. I hope that helps today. Much love.